Over the years, we've seen many interesting characters enter the Destiny universe, but few have managed to reach the popularity of Rhulk, the first disciple of the Witness. And it's easy to understand why. His uncanny design, menacing voice, and uncaring attitude give him this undeniable aura. However, the thing that really took players by surprise was his primary method of attack.
Damn,
This kicking attack became a core memory for many players and launched Rhulk's aura to an all-time high. He was like nothing we had ever seen before. He was unique, powerful, but also unbothered by your presence. It got me thinking though, how hard can Rhulk actually kick? I mean, sure, he can kick hard enough to kill a Guardian, but if we were to calculate the force delivered by Rhulk's kicks from a physics perspective, then how hard is he really hitting us? And can we even calculate that? Welcome back to Destiny Geographic, the only Destiny show that will mistakenly call a hexapedal creature a quadrupod. You all seemed to really enjoy the last episode, and I did too. So let's keep going down this rabbit hole. This video was actually inspired by this comment. So if you have any ideas for future topics, leave them down below, and I'll be sure to credit you if I use it. Also, just like last time, feel free to correct me if I make any mistakes or if you think of something that I don't, because I'm learning right there with you all. Anyway, without further ado, let's dive into the harsh reality of our own inadequacy as we try and calculate how hard can Rhulk actually kick.
I don't want to be. I want to spend my life savings on this. I want to abandon all financial responsibility and dump it in here.
Of course, before we go into the math, we should talk a little bit about Rhulk as a character so we know who we're dealing with. Rhulk was introduced to us in the Valve the Disciple raid back in the Witch Queen. He's also the first and strongest disciple of the Witness. Rhulk is a Lubraean, an intelligent species from the planet Lubrae, a planet that was actually blessed by the Traveler at one point before it left them. Unfortunately, this is the first and last time that we'll probably ever see a Lubraean, since Rhulk is the last of his kind. We'll also probably never see Lubrae, since Rhulk destroyed one of Lubrae's sons, which tore the planet apart. Before Rhulk slaughtered the rest of his people, he was feared amongst them for being too dangerous. Of course, once his work on Lubrae was done, he then went on to follow the Witness as its first disciple, something that, no doubt, only empowered the last Lubraean even more. Unfortunately, we don't really know much about Rhulk's planet, at least nothing that would help us in our calculations. And when it comes to Rhulk's physiology, again, we don't know much. All we can really say for sure is that he's about 18 feet tall, give or take. I assume this because he's roughly 3 Guardians tall, and if we assume a Guardian is around 6 feet tall with the armor, then we can place him somewhere around 18 feet. Another thing to mention is that Rhulk of course wields the power of darkness, and you can see this on full display with his resonance attacks. For the sake of these calculations though, we're going to be stripping Rhulk of all of this. This is a question of physical strength, void of any arcane abilities. Now, attempting to calculate the force of Rhulk's kick is going to be a physics question, and while I did take AP Physics in high school, I do not have a physics degree. Luckily, my dad does, and he also plays Destiny, so he's going to be my main source for these calculations. Hey, so we actually had to change the script up a little bit after the fact, so I'm having to come in now to re-voice over some parts, and unfortunately I'm a bit sick, so if I sound a little different during parts of this, that's why. I hope it's not too jarring. There are some problems though, some unknown variables if we want to keep it classy. If you've ever taken a physics or adjacent science class, you've almost definitely seen this equation. Isaac Newton's famous second law, force equals mass times acceleration, where force is measured in newtons. You also may have seen this equation to calculate kinetic energy, so how much energy a moving object with a given mass has. Energy is measured in joules, which is a Newton meter, or force applied over a distance, so it can also be measured in terms of a force applied over a distance. Then there's the equation for momentum, which kind of measures the quantity of motion an object has. Using Newton's second and the momentum equation, the force of an object can be related to the momentum and the change in velocity over a period of time, with Vf being the final velocity and Vi being the initial velocity. Assuming that a Guardian is standing still when Rhulk kicks them, Vi equals 0, and the force equation then becomes force equals mass times the final velocity over time, where f of v is the velocity of the Guardian after Rhulk kicks them and t is the time of the kick. So if we knew how much a Guardian weighed and therefore had their mass, and knew how fast they went after Rhulk kicked them, we could pretty easily calculate the force and energy of the kick. This seems pretty straightforward, but there are two issues. The first of which is that we don't know how heavy a Guardian is, so the m in these equations is unknown. However, that would be kind of easy to estimate. The other bigger problem is that when when Rhulk kicks and kills a Guardian, their bodies don't fly away. Sometimes Rhulk kicks a Guardian and they just pop up into the air a few feet. Other times, they just fall over. So it's hard to calculate the energy or impulse imparted to the Guardian based on their change in velocity. If Rhulk is really kicking you as hard as we're led to believe, then our Guardians should be sent pretty far when he hits us. But that doesn't happen, which I actually think I have an explanation for, but more on that later. All of that being said, I think there's a way for us to calculate how strong Rhulk might be. However, if I were to just give you a number and say Rhulk kicks with 10,000 newtons of force, or deposits 1 million joules of energy into a Guardian, well, that doesn't really mean anything to most of you without context. We need something to compare this to, something a bit easier to calculate and something we're all familiar with that can instantly kill a Guardian. Something like a Cabal drop pod. So let's figure it out. Also, I just wanted to pop in and say that if you want to try some new gaming snacks or energy drinks, I have a partnership with GamerSupps to get you a discount on anything site-wide. There's obviously no pressure, but I really enjoy GamerSupps, and I think it'd be awesome if we had our own Toad smoothie flavor one day. So if you want to bag something at a discount or try some free samples, head on over to GamerSupps and use code TOAD on your order. Alright, back to the science. Before we start mathing, we need to outline some base assumptions. When calculating the energy in a Cabal drop pod on Earth, we made the following assumptions to make our lives a bit easier. The drop is straight down with no horizontal velocity component, just falling under the acceleration due to Earth's gravity, which is about 9.8 meters per second squared. Now, I want everyone to take a deep breath, try to follow along. If you get lost, that's okay. To get started, we're going to need to know the mass of a Cabal drop pod, since the equations for kinetic energy and potential energy both need that. Kinetic energy is how much energy a moving object has, while potential energy is how much energy an object could have if it were to start moving from a given height. Since it's never stated exactly how big a Cabal drop pod is, we once again have to make some assumptions based on how big the Cabal are. And it should be noted that I'm not referring to the drop pods we use in Lightfall. These seem to be escape pods, not troop transport pods. The reason I say that is because they're simply too small to fit any meaningful amount of Cabal in them. I think Osiris might even refer to them as escape pods, but I don't know if I'm misremembering that or not. The average Cabal is about 2.5 meters tall, so let's assume the drop pod is about 6 meters in diameter, so it can fit a few Cabal warriors inside. Now, we don't know what these things are made of. I mean, yeah, we know it's made of metal, but as far as I'm aware, we don't know what kind of metal. So for the sake of this problem, we're going to assume that these things are made out of a high-strength metal like titanium. This then tells us the density of the metal that the pod is made of. But to find the mass of the pod, we must first find the volume of the pod, since the mass of a spherical shell depends on the volume of the shell. And since these things are closest to spheres, we're going to calculate this as if it was a sphere. Now here's the equation to find the volume of a shell, where RO is the outer radius and Ri is the inner radius. Based on the size of the pod, we'll assume the thickness of the shell is about 0.5 meters. Now that we have the volume, we can use this to calculate the mass of the pod, since we also know the density of titanium. Mass is equal to the volume times the density, so this gives us a final estimated mass of 2.144 times 10 to the 5th kilograms, or 472,700 pounds, or about 236 tons. And for reference, the average school bus weighs about 12 tons. Pretty damn heavy. Now that we know the mass of the pod, we can use this to figure out the terminal velocity. This is the maximum speed the pod can reach due to air resistance, because a falling object doesn't just speed up forever. Based on the mass of an object, every object has a terminal velocity due to air resistance. To do that, we'll use this equation, which, don't worry, is actually not as bad as it seems. Most of these variables we either already know or they can be Googled. Area is easy. Since this is cross-sectional area and our pod is a sphere, we can use the area equation for a circle, which is just area equals pi r squared. In the terminal velocity equation, c is the coefficient of drag, which for a sphere is about 0.45. And the Greek letter rho, which is that p-looking thing, is the average density of air. With all of these numbers plugged in, we get a terminal velocity of 519 meters per second. Now finally, we can calculate the kinetic energy of the Cabal drop pod, since we now have its estimated mass and terminal velocity. So we plug it all in to get 2.89 times 10 to the 10th joules of energy. For those of you who don't realize how insane that is, a school bus moving at 60 miles per hour has a kinetic energy of about 3.263 times 10 to the 6th joules. This means the kinetic energy of the drop pod is, wait for it, 8,859 times that of the speeding school bus. Keep that in mind next time you get crushed by one of these. Now that we have an in-universe reference, let me quickly give you some real-world references before we get to Rhulk. When it comes to a human front kick, the quantitative force can range from anywhere between 466 newtons of force on the low end to the largest recorded numbers of around 7,790 newtons of force. Horses can apparently kick up to about 8,722 newtons, while kangaroos are hanging somewhere around 3,376 newtons. We'll go back to measuring in joules in a moment, I'm just setting the stage. But given that we know basically nothing about Rhulk's biology or the Lubraean species, how are we going to estimate how hard one of his famous kicks are? Again, let me reiterate that this is also a magic-free testing ground. Well, since we can't even properly estimate how far the Guardian flies after they're killed, we need to take another route. This is going to involve us taking some serious creative liberties with Rhulk's xenobiology. But again, since we can't find an exact number with the data we have in game, this is probably the best we can do for now. Since Rhulk's build is humanoid, and since he seems to be about 18 feet tall, that places him at about 3 times the height of a tall human. Since Rhulk is an exceptionally powerful Lubraean, let's compare him to some exceptionally powerful humans, right? If we were to say that his physical strength would scale with ours, then we could compare him to the high-end numbers of recorded human front kicks, which is about 7,790 newtons. So how would Rhulk scale up to Chuck Norris? With this admittedly shaky logic, we can take the highest force output by human front kicks and multiply that by 3 to get an estimate for Rhulk. Doing so would give us 23,370 newtons of force for one of Rhulk's kicks. Sounds like a lot, right? Well, let's convert this to joules so we can compare it to our earlier examples. If I could go ahead and bring back our 2 examples from earlier, remember that a bus moving at 60 miles per hour has about 3.263 times 10 to the 6th joules of energy, while the Cabal drop pod has about 2.89 times 10 to the 10th joules of energy. So, where does Rhulk fall? If we assume Rhulk is kicking through a distance of about 2 meters in game, we can use energy equals force times distance to convert this number to joules. And after multiplying the force of his kick over a 2-meter distance, Rhulk comes out with an estimated 4.674 times 10 to the 4th joules of energy, which is roughly 46,740 joules, which is actually not that much. I mean, sure, it's a lot, but if we were to compare this to the bus, Rhulk's kick only has, get this, 1.4% of the kinetic energy that the bus has.
Serious?
Just for fun, and to give Rhulk a fighting chance, let's also compare this to the impact of the Honda Odyssey. Why the Honda Odyssey?
That's a great question. It doesn't fucking suck.
Honestly, I just really wanted Rhulk's kick to at least get a bronze medal. So how does the Honda Odyssey stack up? Well, this car weighs about 4,590 pounds. It also has a 0 to 60 time of about 6.7 seconds. Converting the miles per hour to acceleration and plugging both that and the weight into F equals ma, we get 8,332 newtons of force. Which is actually great, because that means Rhulk kicks harder than the average Odyssey crash, right? Well, we need to convert this to joules.
Get in the fucking car.
And if we take into consideration the distance that the Odyssey had to travel to hit its target, we get a final reading of nearly 1.5 million joules. I am so sorry, Rhulk. So if there's one thing to take away from this, it's that, yeah, the Honda Odyssey fucks hard. But these are cars and drop pods. If we were to compare this to a human, the number is a little more impressive. Biologically scaling, if we assume the human is only kicking through about 1 meter of distance, this puts Rhulk's kick at 6 times the strength of a human's, which, considering we're comparing him to the top recorded human numbers, is actually pretty impressive. And maybe I was being a bit unfair with the comparisons earlier. But again, it's important to remember that this is all very much an estimate based on the very little data provided to us in game. If we knew more about Rhulk's height, weight, and biology, then we could get you a much more accurate and probably more impressive result. But what do we think is going on here? Well, it's important to remember that once again, these were magic-free testing grounds. If you start to consider the resonance darkness power that Rhulk uses, I think there's a much more reasonable explanation for this. When Rhulk kicks a Guardian, there's a bright yellow flash of resonance power. And if you look closely at his animation when he kicks, he actually brings his entire leg upwards instead of kicking forward and outward. What I think is probably happening here, again, based on the information we have, is that when Rhulk kicks you, it's not actually the kick that finishes the job. I think this kicking motion is more of a delivery mechanism for the resonance power. Maybe when he does this kicking motion, he's actually sending forth a sort of resonance wave that resonates through the Guardian's body and kills them. This could explain the leg raise and could also explain why the distance your Guardian flies after being kicked is inconsistent. It could be that this distance is just based on your Guardian's momentum before the kick. So if your Guardian has momentum when he kills you, then your body will continue with that momentum. However, if you just stand in front of him with no momentum, then the resonance energy kills you and you just fall over. This is probably a simplified explanation, and I have no idea if this is what Bungie intended, at least conceptually, or if the idea really is just that Rhulk kicks you super hard and you die. Maybe all the in-game inconsistencies are just coincidental in-game errors for the sake of gameplay. Maybe there's some technical reason that if your Guardian were to go flying every time Rhulk kicks you, it would just break the game for some reason. I also want to say that if any of you out there are studying physics or just use mechanical physics in your day-to-day life, please let us know if you find an easier or more conclusive way to calculate one of his kicks. I know I'm probably only talking to like a handful of you at best, but I'd love to hear your thoughts, because this had us scratching our head for a while. Either way, I think we did the best we could with the information available to us. And always remember, if you can't explain it, well, it's probably paracausal. What do you guys think of our assessment? Do you think most of Rhulk's power comes from the gifts of the Witness, or do you think most of it comes from physical strength? I'd love to hear your thoughts down below, and of course, if you enjoyed, a like would be greatly appreciated. I'm really enjoying this series, so as long as you are too, I'd love to make more of these. And of course, a huge thanks to my dad for helping me work through all the math here. If you haven't already, consider subscribing for more fun Destiny content, and if you want to watch something else from me, on the left you'll find the sad psychology of the Screebs, and on the right is whatever I or YouTube decides to put there. I hope you're having a great day, night, or whatever it is, and until next time, Guardians, goodbye.
Lovely weather for a sleigh ride to